Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello and welcome to Business Line's State of Economy podcast with the theme of marketing. I am Chitra Narayanan, editorial consultant, Business Line, hosting the show. The topic we are exploring this month is brands that are over 100 years old. What is the reason behind their longevity? The reason we are looking at this topic is because Unilever's Lux, a storied soap, has turned 100. To explore the topic, we have with us our regular Sutradhar Shiv Shivakumar, operating partner Advent International and a leading management thinker. We also have with us Ambi Parameswaran, veteran ad man and author of 11 best-selling books on branding and marketing, including Nawab's Noodles, India through 50 years of advertising. So let's dive in. My first question is to Ambi, actually. Lux has turned 100. Quite amazing that a soap riding on a single USP, the beauty secret of film stars, and with practically no reinvention in its advertising tagline has lasted so long. Since you've written these books on advertising, your take on it, your thoughts on it, can it continue with the same tagline going forward?
I think compliments to Unilever for having nurtured and built the brand Lux. And it's a 100-year-old brand. That's amazing. Just as a trivia, I think Lifebuoy is even older as a brand. And if you look at Lifebuoy and you look at Lux, Lifebuoy has pretty much stuck to its original promise of health. And they've kind of reinvented health in many ways, from carbolic soap to germ-killing soap to overall health soap. Lux, in fact, I think the first ad of Lux probably was 1927, when they started talking about film stars and the beauty secret of film stars. And they've stuck to that promise that it's about glamour, it's about film stars, it's the beauty secret, it's about the soft, soapy feel and fragrance. And they've kept pretty close to what they used to say. I think in 1927, one of their early ads said that 6 out of the 8 top stars in Hollywood use Lux or something like that. So they've continued to do that. Question remains, have they reinvented the brand? I suppose they have. They have changed the formulation of the brand many times. They changed the shape of the brand. And in several countries, they've launched Lux body wash. They've launched Lux shampoo. They've launched Lux face wash. But in India, Lux is pretty much a mid-priced soap. And they've attempted going up into premium soaps, have not done too well. But that said, I think the promise of beauty secret of film stars is something which has stood the test of time. So I don't know why they should change it. They may need to add more layers to it, but the fact that film stars are still seen as kind of shining lights of beauty and style, I don't think there is any need for them to drop that and go into something else. Great brands are built on consistent promise, consistency in what you say, and I think Lux is an example of very consistent and very continuous kind of communication around the same platform of beauty secret of film stars. So I don't think they need to change it now. I don't think the brand has lost its connection with the consumers. I'm told the relaunch which they did 2 years ago has gone off quite well. So they will face threats, and we will talk about threats later. But overall, I think congratulations to Team Lux at Unilever for its 100th birthday.
Very well said, Ambi. Shiv, you've worked with Unilever, and I think you have worked on the Lux brand as well. So your take?
Yeah, so I would say you need to go back in the history of Lux. And I'm a great believer in history and why something happened. Lux became the soap of the film stars because there was a JWT executive called Danny Denker. Danny Denker had a lot of friends in Hollywood, and you'd keep visiting the various movie sets. And In one of those trips, he hit on the idea of giving free Lux soap. And Ginger Rogers became the first Lux actress model in 1926. Surprisingly, 100 odd years ago, they spread that concept of the soap of the beauty stars, and Leela Chitnis became the first Indian star to endorse it in 1934, just 8 years after that. So it was not led by a strategy on the brand as much as somebody who had some connection and then coming into it. I believe Lux over 100. If you look at any brand over 100 years, and we should look at it this way, which were the categories which were there 100 years ago? Categories which were there 100 years ago were airlines, were trains, were newspapers, were postal services, was tea, was radios, was cars, was banks, was cycles, universities. Half of the brands or half of the categories which existed then have all died. That's one way to think about it. The second way to think about it is, in the category that Lux is in, which are the other brands which have been there for 100 years? So Chandrika soap has been there from 1940, 84 years. And Mysore sandal soap from 1918, which is 106 years. If you look at Lux, it's got boxed in my book and nothing to do with the current management team. I think Lux has got boxed for the last 30, 40 years in a packaging and a format and a fragrance. And I think poor extensions across the world, Lux is into dishwash somewhere, Lux is into something else somewhere, etc. across the world, not well managed as a consistent brand globally was one of the problems. It has a few pockets where it exists. The biggest innovation on Lux came in the 1980s in Indonesia from a fantastic marketing director who I admire a lot called Peter Dart. And Peter Dart was the first guy to introduce Lux for skin type. And that innovation went across the world like absolute lightning. And a lot of Lux renewal in the 80s happened thanks to Peter Dart. Okay. Over a period of time, I personally believe that Lux has stayed where it is. It has not reinvented itself. And it will stay where it is. I don't think it will change fundamentally. When I used to handle Lux shampoo as part of the hair category, we used a film star called Urmila, but we pushed the envelope of the advertising to make a much more contemporary, much more joyful, mischievous, fun, etc. And at that point of time, almost everybody in the company said what we were doing was wrong, because everybody wanted the old Greek marble staircase kind of advertising, which was only appealing to a very narrow set. So I think legacy brands, if they don't change with the times, with respect to technology and with respect to consumer taste, they are no longer cool or they're no longer relevant. And they'll continue to have their 7, 8 share or 10 share, etc. So if you're not relevant, you will die with your consumer base. That's what I would say.
Okay. So do you think, it's interesting that you touched on these categories and all. So do you think, but also the consumer is more fickle today. Do you think in today's era of rapid change and fickle consumers, brand immortality will be tough to achieve? The brands that are being born, say, 20 years ago and all, will they be able to achieve the longevity that a Lux or a Lifebuoy may have achieved?
That's what I'm saying. Don't confuse longevity with competitiveness. That's a mistake you're making in this question, Chitra. So if I were to look, and I looked at a set of categories, you look at airlines, KLM is still around. Maybe they're not as profitable as before. Delta is still around. Finnair is still around. All of them are 100 years old. And they've done well in their own they were national carriers. If you look at newspapers, okay, New York Times, 1851, Wall Street Journal, 1889, The Hindu, 1878, Times of India, 1838. Have they moved to the digital world? The answer is no. Will they stay relevant if they continue where they are? Unlikely. But interestingly, the category which has done exceedingly well over 100 years, believe it or not, is luxury brands. Okay, you look at luxury brands, all of them have been over 100 years old, and they've done superbly. You look at Patek Philippe, you look at Piaget, you look at Audemars Peugeot, you look at Gucci. Everybody has done an absolutely fantastic job. Every single luxury brand continues to do well, and they've stuck to design They've stuck to premiumness. They've stuck to innovation. The other set of brands which are more than 100 years old, which have reinvented, done exceedingly well, are universities. Oxford, 1096, Harvard, 1636, Copenhagen, 1479. Each of them have reinvented. So the lesson I would submit to you is that longevity does not mean relevance or competitiveness. You have to change with the times, like the luxury brands have done, like the universities have done, like the airlines have done. If you do that, car brands are another good example. Okay, Mercedes is 100 years old, Ford is 100 years old. Okay, they've kept pace and they've changed. They are not maybe changing as fast enough for EVs, but the day they don't do that, they will not exist. That would be my submission to you.
Okay. Ambi, you do a session titled Adapt, Adopt, Create. So do you think brands that adopt are better placed? Or is there any, if you look at brands from that framework of yours, is there any connection with longevity? Though Shiv says I shouldn't look at longevity, but for us, it's a sexy thing to look at. 100 years is a milestone.
Yeah, I think Shiv has a point. But if you look at multiple categories around the world, especially in the FMCG sector, and I was just doing a little bit of research, if you look at several categories, the market leader has been there for 100 years, right? Whether it is Lifebuoy or whether it is Colgate, whether it is, Nestle, whether it is Mars in, maybe Kellogg, all these brands have lived a long life. They've all lived for more than 100 years. Now, how they lived, how they continued, because I think you cannot continue and survive for 100 years. I'm saying not just a question of surviving for 100 years. I think thriving for 100 years. I think I'll change the term to say, can a brand thrive? You can be a 100-year-old brand, but on your last legs, right? I mean, you may had a glory days of 40% market share and you're down to 5%. And you can still say that I've survived 100 years. That's no big deal. But many of these brands have been market leaders for a long, long, long time. If not number one, they've been number two, number three, but they're up there in the leaderboard. Now, that doesn't happen by accident. And that's what, I do a session on this Adopt, Adapt, Create is a session I do at B schools where I look at how do brands carry their communication across countries. So the first and the simplest way is, of course, take the same advertising, but change the language and run it, right? Because all good brands and all good advertising is based on a fundamental consumer insight. And this consumer insight will be valid whether you're looking at America, you're looking at Europe, you're looking at India, Indonesia, or Australia. Every mom wants to make sure her children do well. Every father wants to make sure he provides for his family, etc., etc., etc. Every woman wants to look beautiful. Every man wants to look smart. So these are fundamental desires. And so some of these successful brands, all successful brands, are built on a core consumer insight, and their advertising is built on that. So sometimes you can actually take the same ad. And in my talk, I gave an example of a brand from S.C. Johnson, which has actually taken the same ad and ran it in some 45 countries with only the change in the language and the super. That is what I call adopt. Then you come to adapt, where you take the advertising, the insight is true, the insight works, but you can't run the same ad for various cultural reasons. Like, most people in India will not recognize, or at least the target consumer of Lux will not recognize a film star from, Brigitte Bardot could be a big film star in Europe and in US, but she'll not be recognized in India. So you need to adapt, which is what I think Lux and several brands do, which is to adapt the advertising. You start using, like what Shiv said, one of the early users of film stars is Leela Chitnis, which was used by Lux in the 1930s, 40s. So I think Lux is an example of a globally templated communication which they've carried around the world. And to be fair, the brand is been, one of the top performing. Though in India, their advertising, like what Shiv says, seems to have got boxed into something too tight. Film stars, what he said very rightly, marble staircases, wearing, fancy clothes, walking down with spotlights on them and cameras flashing. And that's kind of boxed them. And that has given an opportunity to a brand called Santur, which I had the good fortune of working on, to steal a march on Lux. When I started working on Santur in 1994, Santur was not even 1/5 the size of Lux. But come 2014 or 2016, Santur managed to overtake Lux to become the second largest soap brand. I hope one day it becomes the largest soap brand. So there are both positives and negatives in boxing yourself into a successful formula. The successful formula can actually become a millstone around your neck, and you're not able to change with the times. You're not able to change with the consumer. And that's a challenge which brands which do this, same template advertising around the world will have to face.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and it's like, it's either way they lose, because if they change the template, then there'll be one set of customers crying foul saying that, we like the old format and so on. Moving on, in some cases, we've seen the product become irrelevant, but the brand is still loved and the brand name carries on. I mean, I don't know if Shiv will agree with me, but Nokia, I feel, is one of those. At a session recently, we heard Rajiv Bajaj say always brand first and product later. So is there a link here? I mean, how closely linked is brand to product? Shiv, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So the Nokia one is something that I'm closely involved in. So our problem was that in 2011-12, Nokia, 34 share mobile phone brand, tried to pull off a 4-share operating system brand called Windows. And there was utter confusion and poor strategic thinking on the part of both Nokia senior management, the CEO and the board, and also Microsoft, both, not just one. So in a way, I'll say that Nokia was married to Windows, but was trying to date Android. And that never works. Okay, that was an absolute disaster. And they've just closed that. But in my book, I think what's important is, going back to your previous point also, Theodore Levitt wrote a wonderful article in 1960 called "What Business Are You In?" Define your business, not too broadly, not too narrowly. And maybe that's the past of Lux which has caught up with it. Maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we defined Lux as being in the soap business. If we had defined Lux as being in the skincare business, Lux would have had many more opportunities, which is what Nokia did. Nokia stayed with all kinds of things from rubber boots to tissue paper to electronics, etc., and finally said, we are in the business of connecting people and we'll do everything in that area. That also became the tagline. So in a manner of speaking, you have to ask yourself, is the brand growing the category or expanding the category? Is the brand embracing technology or not? Nokia did not embrace the open ecosystem of the app developers, which Android started. Is the brand rethinking its footprint? That's another important question. And finally, does the brand have top talent running the brand, whether it's the brand managers or the marketing manager or the advertising agencies, who are not bound by rules, which actually hampers great people from doing some good work? So in my book, it's only when brands rethink their footprint, rethink their consumers, rethink their offerings and benefits that it works. Staying just true to one benefit doesn't work. And I can give you enough examples. You take GE is a great example. They did all the right things for the last 4-5 years. They started believing in their own hot air and they lost. Boeing is going through an absolute crisis. Okay, safety and trust are fundamental to aircraft. The day they lose that, they have no chance. Shalimar Paints is a 100-year-old brand. Are they doing anything? The answer is no. Okay, Kraft, Kellogg's, Colgate, Harley Davidson will all get boxed in by their category because they have not rethought the footprint or rethought technology and services, what that brand can offer. So in my book, that's how you think about brands and not just, a tagline or what made you successful in the past?
So, Ambi, would you, I mean, if you were to give some recipes for the longevity of a brand, or as you put it, a brand for the brand to thrive for a century, what would be the recipes?
Well, I think Shiva said it right, which is in order for a brand to thrive, you need to be ready to adapt. You need to listen to consumers. You need to make changes. So, I mean, the question is Lux is a toilet soap? Now, could it have become a beauty overall skin care brand, which can offer multiple things, and therefore stay more relevant? So, challenge today is your brand relevant to the consumer? Are you understanding how the consumer is changing? Are you changing what you said, right? Are you changing your product offering instead of being boxed into one particular product brand, right? Can the brand become more than just a product? Can it become a promise? Can it become more than what it is? So if you do that well enough, then I think you will survive another 100 years. But if you don't, then you will, your days are numbered, right? Of course, certain product categories like toothpaste and soaps and, will not get disrupted dramatically like, the telecom and the tech space gets disrupted. But who knows? Who knows what will happen tomorrow, right? But in order to be a successful, thriving consumer product brand, you have to know where the consumer is, how the consumer changing, how the consumer connecting with you, and is my insight still relevant? Who knows? I mean, for example, beauty secret of film stars may be completely irrelevant today because every brand is offering beauty secret of film stars. Someone is offering the hair secret of film stars. Someone is offering the skin secret of film stars. So that whole promise may become irrelevant. I'm sure Unilever has got smart people and they're tracking how their communication is going, whether consumers are connecting with them. If they're not, they need to change the tagline, they need to change the product, they need to change the offering.
Yeah, to be fair, actually, because in India, there was suddenly this whole thing of Ayurveda. So HUL and Dabur and others did try and get into that space. I mean, because they saw that as the customers, even toothpaste, Colgate. I mean, Colgate also entered Ayurvedic toothpaste, right?
But didn't go anywhere, right? I mean, Levers jumped onto the Ayurvedic bandwagon. They launched a brand called Ayush. And they launched toothpaste. They launched multiple products under the umbrella brand of Ayush. But I think they have withdrawn Ayush. I don't think Ayush is anywhere. In fact, the only kind of success they've had in the Ayurvedic space is the brand Indulekha, which they acquired from Kerala, and they've taken it national. And they've had some success because apparently it does something good for hair loss. So they managed to do that. But Ayush, which they tried, has not been a success. You cannot just jump onto a bandwagon and try and say, I'll make it a success. That's not going to work. And they've tried it and it didn't work. In fact, Nindulekha has been somewhat, I would say, a success. But Ayush was an unmitigated disaster, I think.
Shiv, so closing thoughts?
I would say, I don't think you should get hijacked by segments. Like, to give you an example, a Boeing on an Airbus will make planes for the 100-seater, the 200-seater, the 300-seater, the 500-seater. Okay. So whether you want to be in Ayurveda, whether you want to be in science, whether you want to be in Chinese medicine, something, that's a segment. It's not the mainstream. Okay. It could be mainstream for one brand, but for a brand like Lux or whoever it is, it will not be mainstream. So there are some segments you will cover so that you're not flanked. But the point is, you need to stay relevant to the consumer. This is just one part of relevance. But the core of your brand must continue to stay relevant. Okay. And that is the challenge for most legacy brands. And there are a number of them who've just followed. I think a legacy brand which is doing something different right now would be Bata. I must give it to them. A legacy brand which has not done much is Dunlop. Not done much is Philips. A legacy brand I had a lot of admiration for, Brooks Brothers, no longer so. So you have to get your core right and move it along with the consumer and technology trends. And that's more important rather than doing something else. For example, in India, I would say Manyavar can be a 100-year-old brand if they continue to focus on what would it mean for the Indian to dress up for ethnic occasions. Okay, what would it mean tomorrow? Okay, they have forced a Kanali to introduce a Bandgala, which is fantastic. Okay, so that's the kind of thinking which I think marketeers need to display. I worry that in a number of legacy brands, brand managers and marketing managers are more like security guards saying, don't touch the building, as opposed to being architects to say, hey, can I reshape this? That's why luxury brands have done very well, because they have the core, the creative guy, the owner constantly pushing the value up the chain, not down the chain.
Yeah, just to add to what Shiv said, that who got affected by Manyavar early days, I'm talking of 15 years ago, it was Raymond. But it has taken Raymond 10 years to react to Manyavar. And same problem that, we make gentleman suits. Well, how can we make these nice, colorful Bandgalas? That's not our brand. That's not our brand. And then someone finally came and said, no. We can also offer those Bandgalas more stylish. And I think Raymond Ethnics is playing catch up to Manyavar. But I like the style, and I think they will one day get it right. This is a problem. We have not done this before. How can we go there? Will it destroy our brand? We've built it so carefully. If we start making Bandgalas, will Raymond lose its cachet in boardrooms? So these are the challenges which, CEOs have to struggle with. And I appreciate the challenge. And that's the reason it slows them down instead of reacting quickly.
So very nice insights. I think focus on the core and get out of your comfort zone. These are some of the takeaways that one has got from this. Thank you. Thank you, Shiv. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Shiv. Thank you, Chitra, for inviting me.
Bye, Chitra.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.